He had his gun, so he just swung it open.
I start to notice that, the atmosphere feels a little bit weird.
First thing he seen was this 6.5 foot tall, broad shoulder, dark hair. That freaked him out.
We hadn't talked to her about like life and death and what any of that means. She's 3 years old,
So we turned around. Suddenly there's a whole tree falling across the road.
And she was describing to us that, there was a deceased person that she could see visually.
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, where we tackle the ever-expanding history and mystery of monsters and supernatural madness every Monday and Friday. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca for more information, or even check out exclusive content such as interviews and D&D campaigns at patreon.com/CryptidClues.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cryptid Clues. I'm the host with the least amount of meat on my bones, Reuben Olson, joined by the amazing and beefy Taylor Field. Today's episode features food for thought as we tackle the topic of Bigfoot's favorite entrees. What's on the menu for the big guy out in the woods? Does he like to eat berries and mushrooms and make John Marston feel bad? First up on the appetizer list is our 20-second shilling moment where I tell you to go ask us questions over at our email, cryptidclues@gmail.com. Check out our website at CryptidClues.ca. And if you like what you hear, join our Patreon for $1 or more for ad-free, exclusive content and D&D episodes at patreon.com/CryptidClues. Finally, you can find us on almost all social media. With that out of the way, let's see what kind of souped-up thoughts Taylor has in stock to kick us off.
Yes, I mean, you said it. Yeah, we're getting into the diet of Bigfoot. And I mean, food, we all need it. And if Sasquatch is an interdimensional being or native to our planet, either way, they are most likely subject to one of life's basic requirements, which is eating. This topic hit me actually when I was in Harrison not so long ago, and some reports that they showed in the Sasquatch Museum there on Sasquatch actually mentioned food sources. And so I thought, hey, now this is actually worth diving into since we've already covered so many specific Sasquatch components to their existence and just overall evidence. I thought this would be pretty dang good. So I was doing some digging and I found some common vegetation linked to a variety of Sasquatch reports. But before I get into that, I wanted to dive into the common diets for most primates out there. The baseline foods that primates indulge in can be divided into vegetables consisting of vegetation consisting of like fruits, flowers, leaves, nuts, bark, seeds, grasses, stems, roots, and more. And then the animals, which Reuben will get into later on, consisting of like birds, bird eggs, lizards, small rodents, bats, etc., frogs, all that stuff.
Later on, you mean e-vegetably.
E-vegetably. So now, while all of that being said, it's not as refined or as processed as the human diet is, but the parallels are there nonetheless. And in the woods of North America, if you were born and raised in an environment where you were shown how to survive, hunt, and forage for your own food, you would live just fine. I don't think the average human being, city folk, could go out there and survive. Not a single chance. But if a human being was raised out there, just fine. You'd be surviving.
I think if you watched a lot of Survivor, man, you'd have a pretty good shot compared to most people.
Do you think that would, like, I guess the information over experience, do you think the information would help you in that regard?
Well, yeah, I mean, experience is one thing. That's the most valuable thing. But in order to gain that experience, you need some kind of information first. And that is the strongest stepping stone, is to have the information in firsthand. If you go out there with neither, you're really screwed.
Yeah, that's most percentage of people too, unfortunately, these days.
The trick is that all of the Bigfoot simply watch Survivor, man.
Yeah, that's how they do it. That's how they pass on their teachings to the next generation. Like, oh, let's put on, like, watch Les Stroud and watch Survivor Man, and here you go, show you the ways. So on the note of, foraging, finding your food and all that, just regarding the forest, there is more forest than city in Canada. That's just a straight up given. You can just go on Google Maps and see that for yourself. So we know hiding is something Bigfoot, again, does perfectly well. But eating wise, now the forests are full of all these things I listed prior, including larger game for them to hunt like deer and elk. Now, Bigfoot waste has been found before by researchers, and maybe calling it Bigfoot waste isn't the correct term. It's essentially unidentified poop found within close proximity of like dens and sightings and footprints for the most part. But when we look closer at what people are reportedly seeing Bigfoot eat, we can hone in on what I have 8 specific different forms of vegetation, and they are as follows. So the first one is water weeds. And they grow in lakes and ponds, mostly submerged under the water and generally close to the shore. Aquatic fellas like beavers, muskrats, and even turtles eat it. For most land animals, it's not easy to get at and eat unless, however, you're big enough to actually, wade out into the water and get it. Next.
Or, if you just eat the turtles and the beavers and the things that ate the water weeds, you're technically consuming water weeds too.
Exactly. You'd benefit from that for sure. Following that is water lily bulbs. Now, these are essentially the food storage part of the plant itself. And like water weeds, water lilies grow in lakes and ponds, again, close to the shore. And these, however, float on top of the water and have long stems that go down to the mud and into the bulbs. Now, these bulbs must be pulled out. So keep in mind that these bulbs are also underwater. So something with hands and strength are needed to acquire these.
You're kind of making me want to go out to the lake right now, do a little bit of fishing, and just reach down into the weeds, pull out some bulbs, and just take a nice fat bite.
I didn't see and check if these were could be consumed by a human, but if it's good enough for a Bigfoot, it might be good enough for me.
I don't know if my stomach can handle, the mud and grossness of the lake.
Yeah, you'd want to wash it.
I wonder if I could cook it.
Water lily bulbs. Interesting.
Hey, what's for dinner tonight? I cooked up some water lily bulbs.
I'm wondering I'm wondering if you could actually cook them up, fry them up or something like that. A stir fry.
There we go. We'll have to do a Patreon special. Taylor and Reuben eat water lily bulbs.
Water lily bulbs. There you go. Our third component here is reeds. Now, these are more commonly known as bulrushes, and unlike the vegetation before that, these grow near water of any type. So lakes,
this is
ponds,
a lot of stuff that grows near water.
It's a lot of stuff, yeah. Streams as well. They're most commonly found in roadside ditches, and this is due to the fact that the roads are built on raised ground to allow for the water to flow off to the sides into the ditches. So more often than not, this water stagnates and becomes a habitat for insects and a plethora of plant types. But it's worth noting as well that many people see Sasquatch out while driving at night, and perhaps it's maybe in a small harvest session in ditches, for this food, ripping it out. The rushes themselves can be difficult to pull out of the ground, but again, such a task could be executed with ease by a Sasquatch.
I really don't like the idea of eating anything out of a ditch. Like, roadkill is probably the most common thing you'd expect to find that maybe a Bigfoot would eat off the side of a road. Mm-hmm. But just gross insect plants and stuff, that's nasty.
Yeah, that stagnating scent that comes out of there, it's very putrid. It's not sanitary by any means, so I know what you mean.
I can't even imagine a Bigfoot eating that, okay? Like, I can believe the water lily bulbs. I can believe the other things. This is just gross.
It is gross. Maybe that's why they're so stinky. Although that might be more in line with our next food, as we have wild onions. Now, domestically, we call them spring onions. Personally, I absolutely love these. They're so freaking delicious. But
Wait, what? You had spring onions?
Spring onions. Well, they're kind of like a green onion or like a chive, right? Very similar to that.
Oh, okay. So it's a more common thing.
Yeah. You have to be careful how much of these you actually ingest because it can cause stomach issues. And a fair bit of animals out there tend to avoid onions in general. But there is a mountain in Northern California. It's actually called Onion Mountain.
A swamp. And in that swamp, Shrek decides to eat all of the onions.
I was wondering where you're going with that. I was like, there's an actual swamp in this California mountain. What? How did you know that? But it's called that because of the abundance of wild onions that grow there. And coincidentally, Sasquatch footprints have been found, including a handprint as well on the mountain. And so people kind of think that there's a connection. Maybe it's ingesting and eating onions. So
that's nasty. It'd probably just take a nice fat bite out of it like an apple.
Yeah, just the crunch. I remember I used to do that when I was younger. I used to just bite into onions. And sometimes I could handle it. Sometimes it was just, no, it was potent. Yeah.
I can't picture you doing that now.
Oh no, I can't. I'm much more sensitive now. Like even peeling them, my eyes just get watery so fast. But green onions, I can do that. I can bite right into those. I really like them.
From what I was reading, actually, if you want to avoid crying when you're cutting an onion, you don't want to cut all the way through. You almost want to like make a little incision to get the outer layers, peel them off, and leave the core, because the core is the part that makes you cry.
The core is the part that makes you cry. Interesting. I'll remember that because we cut a lot of onions in this house.
Next time you do it, just like make an incision partway through the onion and like try to like scrape around it so you have like a ball or a nugget, as if it was like a plum pit or something.
Okay. Usually I don't like cutting the core like to cook with, but Madison likes to use every bit of the onion, so she cuts the core. Well,
it's either that, right? Or you end up having like one of those big like face guards or something covering your entire body. Like a hazmat suit, you almost need to cut an onion without crying.
Absolutely. I usually wear sunglasses to help, but it doesn't help. But moving on, we have grass stems. Now, these are pretty much everywhere. You would pull out the long grass and eat the more tender lower white parts. So while a Sasquatch would have to eat a lot of this, it's still a factored in food source for them. And then we have blueberries as well as just berries in general. They're all over the woods of North America. And the largest amounts of berries you can find out here happen to be blackberries and salmon berries. However, blueberries have been the only observed berry to be a food source for a Sasquatch. One does have to be cautious though too, because other animals like bears and such are drawn to berry patches in those locations. But in regards to a Sasquatch, it's reported they can break a branch off and eat the riper berries from it.
You might hear some sounds in the background of a Sasquatch picking off the tape off of a cardboard box, and I call the Sasquatch this terrible cat that lives in my house, just eating tape. I don't understand
what's swinging
her
right now on your camera and on your webcam?
Is there something swinging?
I thought I saw. Oh, it's just a cord from your microphone.
Oh,
I was like,
goodness, you had me
jangling.
really scared. Like one's just swinging through on a vine or something. My cat's just nuts. She's literally behind me, just eating tape off of a cardboard box, and I can't get her to stop. I have to take away all of the cardboard boxes in the house. There's not a lot of them. It's just, she's eating tape. It's disgusting.
It's dark enough in your room that I feel like, just like it's like a ghost could peer, like a pair of like feet could just start dangling from behind
really
you.
Creepy. So for everyone listening right now, Taylor's sitting in a nicely lit office. He's got some beautiful posters behind him, all of our various hobbies and things. And then here I am sitting in the darkened room of our unfinished edition. Spookiness behind me, a single light bulb, and a cat just eating tape, just crinkling it between her teeth.
What kind of tape is it?
It's just sticky packing tape. She can't really rip it off or anything. She's just like munching it between her teeth.
Oh, that's gross. Yikes.
I guess that's like one way to like clean your teeth.
Actually, it probably would be. I don't know how effective it would be, but
about as effective as this ad break. And we're back, everybody.
Oh, you baited me good with that. Holy smokes.
Yeah, we were showing a little bit late for that ad break, and I was like, I gotta come up with something.
Well, moving on from our previous berry discussion, we have Devil's Club root. Now, this was a major food source and medicine for early native North Americans. Humans would dig out the roots, but again, a Sasquatch would simply just pull it out of the ground. This plant is pretty common in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, and it's recognized by its sharp spines, it's like prickles, on the stalks and leaves that they can actually break through the skin when they break off, so you have to be careful if you're handling this. Now, it seems Sasquatch reportedly scrape the spines off so they don't become subject to the sharp points on it, which I found just a cool little reflection of intelligence there. And lastly, we have willow leaves. These are edible by human beings, and it's apparent
Really?
that Sasquatch like them too. Being easy to eat, the willow branches, however, can be tough to acquire. They can taper down from thick to thin branches, but with a Sasquatch, it's said that they draw the willow branch through their teeth, stripping the leaves off into their mouth. This is a very clean and easy process because the branch is super tough and doesn't break. Now, we've looked and explored these prominent vegetations as a food source. The meat section is a little easier to digest. Again, like you'll be getting more into that, but just touching on a lot of people report like chickens being taken away from their farms, fish storage and traps being raided with footprints nearby, that sort of stuff. And even being reported to stalk like raccoons, hogs, and other types of rodents.
Yeah, you'd think, we'd be talking about the Sasquatch, but we're here diving into the details of vegetation out in the woods.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Don't worry, I've got some reports coming up.
All in all, they seem to be consistent in eating for both nutritional and medicinal reasons, which I find fascinating. Now, bears, elephants, lizards, and even bees, and specifically some primates, have all one thing in common as a survival trait. They can self-medicate. They know how to eat things that make them feel better, prevent disease, or even kill parasites like flatworms, bacteria, and viruses. Or simply just to help aid with digestion. Think of it as like seeing a dog eat grass. You just witnessed a form of self-medication. The dog probably has an upset stomach or just like a tummy bug, and the grass helps them vomit it up or eliminate it via pooping. So most studies of animal self-medication, however, are with the great apes. Now, in 1960s, a Japanese anthropologist called Toshisada Nishida observed chimpanzees in Tanzania eating aspella leaves. Holy smokes.
Aspella, but you can't pronounce it.
No, apparently not. The aspella leaves have absolutely zero nutritional value. This behavior became noticed by several other individuals throughout a variety of other chimp colonies. It wasn't until 1996, a biologist named Michael Huffman suggested this was a form of self-medication. Huffman worked for years in Japan at the Primate Research Institute of Kyoto University and saw a parasite-ridden constipated chimpanzee in Tanzania begin to chew on the leaves of a noxious plant it would actually avoid otherwise. However, by the next day, upon analyzing this, the chimpanzee's symptoms were on the mend and it was recovering quite well. I reckon Bigfoot can do or already do the exact same thing.
Well, let's assume for a second, too, that Sasquatch is literally just a more native kind of human covered in hair and taller than us. There's lots of reports of them speaking some kind of language and stuff like that. But there's also reports, if you dive really deep down the rabbit hole, of people that say they have experiences with Sasquatch out in the woods, speaking to them or like being buddy-buddy with them when they get really close. And I have read a couple of reports where like a lady, for instance, has apparently a group of Sasquatch friends that speak to her and have taught her some random little things like, hey, if we have all these leaves and herbs and we mush it together, we get this medicine. You can rub it over your body and it does this or does that. And of course, this is subject to just having an open mind and believing these people, whether or not they're possibly crazy or possibly not. Who knows what's really going on, but there are reports out there of this kind of behavior if we're assuming that Sasquatch is an intelligent being.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned that too. It's just the kind of like mushing things together and using it. There's been other people talk about seeing Sasquatch use like seaweed and kelp and that kind of thing, like for certain, I don't know if you call it like remedies, but they put it on specific parts of their body. And then they'll also eat it. So they're obviously very aware of parts of their body that could be in pain or need some kind of
absolutely aid. You know, the father Sasquatch goes out, he gets the seaweed and he goes, look, son, this is really slippery. You rub it in your armpit and then you can make armpit farts and annoy your mother.
There you go. That's all I got for at least the vegetation portion, but I understand that you have a good chunk of notes yourself.
I do. While you had the lean and green parts of this, I decided to dive into the juicy, gooey meat snacks that Bigfoot is sometimes reported for. And I'm going to make this exciting because while I'm going to be starting off with a little topic of the big beef and all that, I'm also going to dive into BFRO reports. And I'm going to just shorthand them all, but I'm going to list the report numbers for anybody that wants to look these up on the BFRO and read very detailed reports of different Sasquatch encounters and eating, especially because these are all about eating. So first off, before I dive into those reports, there are various reports that talk directly about the different creatures Bigfoot devours, but the encompassing piece of evidence we have for Bigfoot being a meat eater would be the carcass piles that are often found in Bigfoot hotspots. And this is a strange phenomenon. Deer skeleton piles are common in these hotspots, in caves, and even nesting sites, as found by groups like Expedition Bigfoot, Finding Bigfoot and their researchers, and other investigators. And while other natural creatures will roam, like cougars will drag kills up a tree, bears will devour on the spot, but something with hands in the woods is carrying kills to a single pile and just leaving skeletons out there. And this isn't in just a couple of places. This is all around the world in Bigfoot hotspots where people find totally bone dry, picked clean skeletons, skulls, pieces. Something was clearly eaten, scattered about a little bit, but drugged to a pile because there's tons of carcasses just piled up in a little mountain. And that's super creepy. Now, because this is obviously in Bigfoot hotspots, I'm going to attribute that to Bigfoot just dragging kills to a certain area to eat. And it's usually near a nesting site, so it kind of makes sense, you know, drag dinner home for the family, everyone eats, and they throw it in the garbage pile. Now, as for the individual reports, like I said, I've just shortened a bunch of these. I don't want to go into detail or take anything away from the wonderful BFRO team. These are great free reports you can read online in a huge database. So before I start reading these off, I'm going to tell the report number here. Sorry, I haven't had enough caffeine, so I might stumble over my words a little bit. But report 31888. A biologist witnessed through their tent window a Sasquatch carrying a deer carcass up the side of a hill where it tore appendages off like skin off of a drumstick. It ate various pieces of the deer, including the liver, heart, and more, which was discovered later as the carcass was left behind for the witness to peek at in the morning. And the reason that this witness got a peek at the carcass was because the Sasquatch noticed it was being watched and approached the tent slowly, but accidentally knocked into a frying pan that was hanging off of a rack, which fell down and spooked it back into the woods, and it did not return. The witness had multiple encounters in this area, and I highly recommend checking this one out. Moving on, we have report number 45831. A driver crashes into a Bigfoot carrying a deer kill in its arms across the highway. The car gets absolutely destroyed front to back and gets covered in dirt and blood, but the driver was simply too scared to exit the vehicle and then reported the incident to insurance as a deer crash, which was hard for them to believe considering the speed that the driver was going was not that much. Investigators could, unfortunately, not make it out to inspect the vehicle and gather DNA fast enough. Report number 48732. An anonymous witness reports the family dog going nuts, barking at a herd of deer, which wasn't uncommon for the location. But what was unusual were the deer booking it across a field, being chased by a Sasquatch. Howls and screams were also heard by this witness. Report number 1495. This is a fun one, Taylor. After a summer rain shower, a couple were driving down a wet highway and had to slow down to avoid groups of frogs that had collected in the rain puddles. They witnessed a Sasquatch scooping up, catching, and eating these frogs before it noticed them approaching and quickly stood up and ran away when the vehicle got close.
No way.
Just scooping up and eating frogs, you know? That's kind of a weird thing, eh?
Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to I can like visually picture that. That's just incredible. That's so different from anything I really expected.
Totally. So report number 43843. A woman observes a Sasquatch no more than 30 feet away, hyper-focused on eating mussels and clams on the edge of a river. She watches it break open the shells with its hands and then break over some of the bigger and harder ones over a rock. It mostly ate them by pouring them into its mouth, but did occasionally take scoops with its fingers and shove its dirty face full of mussels and clams. Report number 35330. A fisherman camped overnight in his RV after doing some fishing and found, in the middle of the night, something had rummaged through his ice box, which was secured with a 45-pound lid and wrapped in bungee cord. Somehow, it was completely opened and undone and cleaned out with not a fish or particle in sight. Nothing around the RV either. However, upon investigation, he was hearing wood knocks and felt like he was being watched. Now, that's the end of my shorthand reports, and what I did to find these. You can go through the BFRO's website, bfro.net. You can scroll through all the thousands of reports on the site. There are many, and it gets updated quite frequently. Or if you want to find something on a specific topic like I did, if you go to Google or any search engine and you put quotes around the URL name, bfro.net, search a keyword like eating or something like that. The search engine like Google will just take the site and it'll look and scour across that site for that instance of that word, which is how I found all of these. I just Googled bfro.net in quotes and the word eating, and these bad boys all came up. And honestly, it was amazing being able to narrow down my search on this website to just find reports of Bigfoot eating things. There were lots of other reports too about vegetation, blueberries, raspberries. There was some absolutely, sorry, my cat's behind me now playing in a bag. At least that's a lot safer than eating tape off a cardboard. A little spooky though, sitting here in the dark. Anyways, there were lots of reports of Bigfoot like picking berries off of a bush. Some terrifying encounters, honestly, where like children and stuff were frightened, but then the grandmother was like, "Oh, I saw it out in the back eating raspberries off the bush." So many sightings, and that's just a Bigfoot eating. And look at these report numbers. There's a report that's number, what did I say, 1,495, 1,495. We go to reports all the way up to 43,843. Like, that's insane. There's so many reports to go through.
Well, now I'm curious, if you don't mind me interjecting with a question. So, if they are interdimensional or they're subject to our world, all of that stacked with what I was kind of talking about, like eating medicinally and stuff. Like, are they eating just because they're subject to where they exist here in our world? Are they eating like for taste? Like what? Like, what I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, why do you think they're eating these things that they're eating? Is it because they're edible? They're obviously eating some things that we can't, and I imagine a lot of these things they're eating meat wise, they're not cooking it, so they're very differently built than us in terms of how they can tolerate their meat and even some of their vegetation.
I know there's lots of different things we've discussed about what Bigfoot could be, whether it's an ape, a human hybrid, an alien, or an interdimensional being, or something that's just ascended to another realm of existence, essentially. But if we jump all the way to the bottom of the rabbit hole and we look at something like Ron Moorhead's idea of Bigfoot, which is very fascinating. If Bigfoot's a quantum being, but it needs to pop into this world to populate, give birth, raise its young, it's obviously subject to being in a flesh and blood body that requires food. And who knows what it's like if they pop to a different dimension. Maybe they're heading to another higher plane of existence or something. Or maybe, the quantum realm is just simply, hey, we just slid into another reality and there's also food over here too, so we can just go back and forth. We don't know what it's like. But to say that, I don't know, like honestly, there's probably the 4 different types of Sasquatch that would probably require food. I think the spiritual idea of Bigfoot probably doesn't. But, it's a very interesting question you brought up. I'm not too sure how to answer that besides just looking at the different types of Bigfoot.
Do you think, obviously, again, the intelligence is reflected because that one report where the Bigfoot was going in and knew, I'm going to eat the heart, I'm going to eat these other prominent internal components to this deer's body because that's where most of the nutrition is, the benefit, like most of the, the good stuff is. So that level of intelligence is definitely there. Do you think that changes depending on, again, you mentioned spiritual, if we're looking at a sulfur smelling, red-eyed looking Bigfoot, like what do you think their diet consists of? Do you think it's going to be in line with what people are seeing them eating fish and oysters and berries, or do you think it'll be different?
Honestly, I don't know. That's a kind of a creepy one. I mean, Bigfoot could eat for any reason. Maybe it's not even the nutrition. Could just be like some kind of horror factor. Maybe it wants to scare somebody. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's not very likely, but you have to approach this with an open mind. All these possibilities exist at the same time, like Schrodinger's cat in a box. Until we have solid evidence, until we can look at quantum theory and stuff, bring all the science together, these possibilities all exist at the same time, and that's what makes it so fun to discuss.
Mm-hmm. I guess my last question is, how much do you know about Sasquatch poop?
I understand that there's a couple of poops out there that are very long and straight.
Yes, that's what I was just kind of like alluding to. There are some that are found like in between like tracks and stuff like that. Do you know what kind of research has been done into that? Because I imagine it would just be the same kind of thing where you can test the hair and the hair comes up with maybe a little bit of human DNA, but a lot of it's just unknown. And I imagine that's the same for the poop stuff, because when I was trying to find, it's not easy to look around for poop information online. So
it's really not. And it's much like eDNA from my understanding, where you can look at something, you can gather DNA from it, and just like a hair sample or the DNA that we have of Bigfoot, you can allude that this came from something that's 98% human. Mm-hmm. But you'll also look at a sample like that, and poop especially is littered with all kinds of stuff. You won't be able to find a single strand of DNA easily that came from the being that made the poop. You're going to find everything that digested in there too.
Right.
So you might find deer and you'll go, well, that's definitely not a deer poop. You might find berries or something and go, well, this isn't real. Like, what is this? That's not a DNA strand. I don't know what. Does raspberry have DNA? But trying to dissect poop like that and figure out what made it, that's the kind of research that would really matter. And it's very hard to do with that. Mm-hmm. So the only way to really scientifically research poop, from my knowledge, and this is mostly just me theorizing and guessing because I'm not Googling poop research right now, you have to look at known samples. This is what bear scat looks like. This is what deer scat looks like. And then you look at this new sample of poop, this really long, thick, straight turd, and you go, oh, what made this? Until we have more Sasquatch poop and confirm Sasquatch existence, we will never know what made that poop. Scientifically, we can only guess.
Mm-hmm. No, that's perfect. It's a perfect explanation. It satisfied my longing for an answer right now.
And the clearest answer I've had all night versus all the other crazy questions you asked me that just dive off into me rambling about random things.
No, it's all been good.
Interdimensional Bigfoot and stuff. So even though I brought up a few reports here, I would like to reiterate the number of reports that exist. I mean, from memory, I can recall some of my favorites from other shows and articles. One I've brought up before, such as a young Sasquatch approaching a fisherman, and the fisherman surprised to see a furry little dude eagerly murmuring and gesturing to a bucket of fish. So the fisherman looks at it and he gives a fish to this strange little creature that walks up to him, then looks up and sees a parent Bigfoot standing in the bush, filled with an anxious expression that this child of it just approached a human. Immediately after gifting the fish, the parent takes it off with the kiddo. That's a report that stuck with me for a long time. Several hunters also report their hunts being interrupted by stalking Bigfoots going after the same prey. One hunter was even disturbed and caught a female Bigfoot in his scope by accident. Couldn't pull the trigger when he saw the human-like face on this thing going after his deer he was about to shoot. It's just so strange to think how these things are out there, and there's so many reports, but every single time you see one of these things, you're surprised. You don't have time to whip out your phone and take a nice HD photograph. All you have left at the end of it is your word. And that's what we base a lot of our discussions off of, is other people's words.
Very well said. I sympathize for people that, you're in disbelief when you see it. And I know I'd be in disbelief too. Everything that we're taught, and we've spoken to this before, we are raised in this society thinking we're alone. We got cats and dogs and all that's the norm. We pay taxes, bills, we drive around in cities, get gas, groceries. It's just, aliens are one thing, maybe they're the same thing. But when you think of something that we share this planet with another humanoid entity, it's unfathomable. People, it's hard to come to terms with that realization that we are not alone.
It is, and it really opens the door to making life exciting and wanting to be a truth seeker. You want to find out more. Once you start to accept the possibility of these things being out there, it just becomes, honestly, like for me, it becomes an obsession. I think, though, my final thoughts in the end is that Bigfoot is just like us, and would eat anything it could to survive, veggie or beef. It doesn't matter what's on the menu if it means nutrition. Then a family of Bigfoots will eat whatever, wherever they feel like it. Hopefully, the numerous reports of people going missing in the woods aren't people being eaten. And with that, kiddos, sleep tight so the boogeyman doesn't come pick you up and drag you into the woods to be its next snack. Or teach you how to cook a mean veggie dish.
I was wondering, where's this transition going?
Those are just my closing notes. That's all I got.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, that's all I got from my notes too. I will just say that one more thing though, like you mentioned about just hunters being interrupted as they're looking for the same game that a Sasquatch is too. I think that's fascinating because there's a few times where I've looked into reports where hunters are out in the woods and it's not just one Sasquatch, it's a few of them. Like a Sasquatch's job is to chase and coax this deer to a specific choke point where another Squatch is waiting to actually, land the blow and collect it. And hunters get caught in this, like, oh my God, like I'm surrounded by 3 of these things. And there's a piece of meat involved. There's an actual, like, not like a trophy, but this is like, in the animal kingdom, food is like a currency. And now that this has been presented, now I need to carefully get out of this situation.
Yeah.
So
I also think it's fascinating that these kinds of encounters happen and you hear about them because honestly, that hunter is in the perfect situation to observe a Sasquatch. They're trying to be quiet. They've covered up their scent. They're probably up in a tree stand or something. Unlike regular human interaction and all the Bigfoot reports you get where you get a glimpse of these things, these hunters are out there getting real spooked and scared. They can't pull the trigger. They don't have anything on them at that time to take a photograph or a video. But they get the most raw witness to Sasquatch. And I think that's just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. And it's hard for a lot of them to come forward and to share. To be in that situation, like it's one thing where if you see this thing and it acknowledges you and you are acknowledging it and it's like, okay, I'm going to leave now. But if you are in this situation and I firmly believe that these things are aware of what they're doing sometimes in the presence of human beings. And so they act a specific way. And if you are seeing unknown to them that you are here in a tree stand and it's doing its own thing and it's acting out as if no people are around in a manner that they don't want humans to see them acting, whether it's hunting, it's eating, doing whatever it's doing, then you're going to see something probably really terrifying. And I think that's what sticks with these hunters.
That other report of the one family that went camping and the guy goes off hunting and he sees a dogman and a Bigfoot. And the dogman starts going towards the camp hunting his wife and everything. And he's like, yo, no, I'm not going to handle this. He points a stick at it, like pretending it's like a big rifle or whatever.
Yes.
And then the other Bigfoot like gets down on its legs and does like the spider crawl thing.
Yes.
That was a report that just, I hate that. And that's the kind of thing you don't want to witness. Yeah, they don't act like that when they know you're around.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh God, I'm getting chills.
Yeah, I don't like talking about that late at night for podcasts. That's super creepy.
Well, I think that's pretty much it for this episode. We'll probably just close her out there.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of notes to begin with, and I was super scared we wouldn't get too far, so I just did the one ad break. Nope. And now I'm like, oh no, I missed my chance for another ad break. Sorry, Taylor. You're welcome, listeners.
Yeah, no, that's all good. That was honestly, it was a good conversation. And at the end of the day, it's hard to interrupt good conversation. And we had some good topics and talking points in there. So
Yeah,
I loved
absolutely.
it.
Always a blast.
Yeah, we'll be back soon. We're back next week. We got again. Make sure you're tuning in to part 1 and the part 2 preview of Haunted the Grassman that me and Reuben have been working on. It's fantastic. Big shout outs to you, Reuben, for working on that. We'll be diving into part 3 soon. That will be moving forward. The full episode of part 2 is on the Patreon, and then all the other remaining parts will just be exclusively on the Patreon. So keep in touch with our social media channels to see updates on that moving forward. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Do you have anything else you want to add, Reuben, before we clock out?
That's all I have for me. So if you want to do some goodbye plugs, I'll say bye-bye at the end like usual.
All right. Well, you can find us with our website, CryptidClues.ca. You can send us an email, CryptidClues@gmail.com. You can find us on our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. And like I said before, on our Patreon, where you can get ad-free early episodes available there. And until next time, everyone, take care and stay safe.
Bye-bye.